Yes, I am an internal medicine doctor. I graduated medical school in 2001 in Kansas City, Missouri, and I ended up owning two of my clinics, being medical director and being a teacher for medical students for 8 years. I've researched a lot about vaccines for over 20 years, and I have also attended business and scientific meetings where they talked about the future of humanity around the world. And when I saw that those technologies in those meetings that they were talking about were being used in these new vaccines for COVID-19, I decided to warn everybody around the world because I fear that these are crimes against humanity.
Right, right. Thank you so much for your work, doctor. And now we ask you a question, which is about the coronavirus. Is it a real medical pandemic, or what are your views about it?
No, by any definition, we do not have a pandemic. If you look at the death rate of anything, of all-cause mortality around the world, it stayed about the same. We don't have an increase of deaths from this at all. So this is about the same as any other flu season. It's really the media that has scared everybody. It's the media that has pushed this, and also with different world leaders around the world. They're pushing this agenda. They're pushing the fear and the panic.
Right, right. Doctor, you said that there is no increase in overall mortality, but if we look at the death rates of COVID-19, especially in the United States of America, it is rising too fast and it's quite a lot. So what do you think, why the death rate of COVID-19 is so high?
Oh, well, that's easy. If you know anything about statistics, you can really manipulate that. What they're doing is they're counting anything that looks like the flu, because the COVID-19 is the flu in essence. Anything that looks like the flu is counted as COVID-19. Even if you don't have a positive test, you can have a car accident. You're still killed of COVID-19. It's unbelievable. So you can just die with it, and it's considered a cause. Also, we know that the testing mechanisms are terrible. We're using something called a PCR test. It was never intended to be used for diagnosis, but we're using it inappropriately for this. And we know that when we use this kind of a test, we will get many false positives, sometimes twice as many. They know this, but this is just to justify and amplify the number of cases so that they can push the other agendas that are really the main. It's not about a virus. I hope people can see that by now. It's a bigger worldwide agenda. It's about the Great Reset, bringing in the new world order. And that's really what we need to face about what's going on right now.
Right. So, doctor, here you mentioned about manipulating statistics, or the doctors using death certificates to manipulate the cases.
Mm-hmm.
So here, what we need to understand, that you also mentioned about the New World Order and the Great Reset. Why would the doctors give COVID-19 as a cause of death in the certificates, and how is it related to the New World Order?
Well, they're being paid a lot more money. If you just simply put the diagnosis of COVID-19, you can get almost $2,000 more per patient. That's a lot of money. If somebody is admitted to the intensive care unit and then put on a ventilator, they can get between $13,000 and $16,000 more just for that one person. And then there's other services that are piled up. So the money that they make is quite a lot more money. The other thing is, and I know this from my colleagues who still practice in hospitals, they're being pressured to put the diagnosis on there. Sometimes they fear that they might lose their job if they don't put that diagnosis on there. So there's a lot of different pressures. There's monetary incentive. And so that's why you're seeing that happen.
All right. So here we are clear about it, audience. So there is monetary incentive and there is peer pressure that you can lose your jobs. And so even if we see like World Doctor Alliance, if we see Dr. Carrie Madej and we try to look up her in YouTube, or we search about her in Google, you say they have been fact checking her and removing all the videos, and we have been facing medical censorship. So why this medical censorship is being there? Why don't we see open debates? What do you think about it?
Well, we have not had freedom of speech in medicine for decades. I can tell you that we absolutely know in science and medicine the cures for many things. I have been a part of research where we found the cures for things. For instance, Pfizer Everybody knows that drug company. They actually found out, they were working with a scientist who found out the cause of why people get blockages in their arteries and have heart attacks. Well, the cause actually comes from dental bacteria, believe it or not. That the bacteria goes and travels and goes into the artery and into the wall of the artery. Well, then it weakens the wall, so your body's smart and it knows that it doesn't want the artery to burst open and bleed, so it puts cement around there, which is called plaque. When they found that out, they said, I wonder if our antibiotic, azithromycin, will work for it. So they did a study. We were part of it. And at first, the study was doing great. All these people's blockages were shrinking, and that's what we thought. And then all of a sudden, they stopped the study. They told us not to do it anymore. And we asked the researcher why, and he said, well, because it was working too well. The blockages were just disappearing. There were no more blockages. That means the person didn't have the disease anymore. And he said, nobody can know that. What are we going to do for a living? All of my colleagues, all the other doctors said, we can't tell anybody about this. I and other people were threatened. They said, don't tell anybody about this. If you do, you'll never work again because we can't let anyone know this. What will we do for a living? How do we make money? That's literally what my colleagues said. That's just one of many things we know how to cure people with. So it's really for money. We're all a dollar sign. It's about making people sick and maintaining them sick for the dollar. And that's just a sad state of affairs.
Right. So if we follow the money trail, we come to understand that how it is linked to the death certificates and how this rising in cases. So doctor,
Yes.
just a quick question. Is the rising cases means rising sick patients, or does it mean something else?
Yeah, it just means positive test. And what is a positive test, right? There's different kinds of tests they're giving out. Oh, we also know many of the tests were contaminated, meaning they already had the COVID-19 positive in them. 2 batches from our own country in the Center for Disease Control. How did that happen? They were already positive. So how many other batches are like that? There's a lot of fraud and mismanagement going on. So just because you have it doesn't mean, or positive, it doesn't mean you really have it. We don't have confirmatory testing to say if you really have it or not. These are just screening measures that were never used to be really diagnostic measures.
Right. So FDA has given this PCR test an emergency authorization. It's not approved, and even the inventor, Dr. Carey Mullis, said that this is not for diagnosis, and the manufacturer also writes on the kit that this is for research only and not for diagnosis. But so surprisingly, the world is using this as a gold standard test. So when we talk about the root of this problem, like why this is happening all around the world, then we talk about the Great Reset and the New World Order. But we will come to that after that. But first, let's talk about the vaccinations because that's the point of focus right now. So what vaccines are all about? So what's the theory behind the vaccines and what are the ingredients?
Well, a normal vaccine, you would actually take the actual virus, it's dead or alive, put some toxins in with it in a syringe and inject it into the person. The idea is that your body would see the weakened version of the virus, but get knowledge about how to fight it in the future without hurting you too much. That's the idea. Well, this time, believe it or not, we don't have the actual virus organism on file that's making people sick. They were never able to isolate the whole virus in its entirety. So what they were able to do is get pieces of genetic material in sick patients, and they only had pieces. So they said, well, this looks like what's making people sick. And then they had a computer program fill in the missing blanks. And so then they got the entire code, or the genetic code. And then they had a group of scientists that looked at it and said, yeah, that looks right. We'll use that. They literally came up with a code by using some assumptions that this code made by a computer and pieces from a sick patient was what was making people sick. So this is the first time, this is the first time in history we've ever done anything like that. So this is called recombinant DNA, recombinant code. Recombinant means we're taking pieces together and pushing them together. And synthetic gene synthesis, meaning we are doing something that's not from nature because we're using a computer code. This has never happened in the history of humanity, and we're doing a grand experiment on everybody. So now we have this code that we don't really know is the thing that's making people sick. But we're putting the code inside of our bodies, and our bodies are smart. So the body knows it's not from nature. It attacks it and destroys it like it should. So then they had to come up with another way to keep this synthetic code inside your body. And so they came up with some nanotechnology, which is called a nanolipid particle. So they take this nanolipid particle, they put it around the code, and then they inject it into the body. Now the particle, the lipid layer, will fool the body, trick the body, allow the code into the cell. The cell reads it, and then will actually start making that code. The code is supposed to be part of the spike protein of the virus. So your body will literally be making part of the virus and spitting it out. How long? We don't know. There's no off button. It's also using mechanisms to bypass and change how your immune system works. This is dangerous. Our bodies are pretty miraculous and very intricate, and one thing can be just disastrous. So we're changing the way how the immune system works, and there's no off button. They have done animal studies on this exact vaccine with this exact virus, by the way, so it's not a new virus, in the last 20 years. And all the animal studies failed because they were changing how the immune system worked. So when the animals saw the virus in the future, the body didn't react normally. It went haywire. It had an exaggerated response. And so the body started to attack itself. The lungs were attacked, more fluid. The liver was attacked, more liver failure, and many animals died. So it was a failure because they were manipulating the way our body's immune system works. So do you think it's going to be different this time? I don't think so.
That's correct. That's correct. Doctor, you talked about the animal studies and all the animals were affected. So here I would like to tell you the audience that please screen record this, because in case this is pulled off YouTube, then we have it with you. Also, I wanted to tell you that please share this message to everyone so that they can watch this live and get the clue about what the vaccines are all about, because we are going to focus on the vaccines right now. So doctor, you mentioned about the animal studies. The animals were adversely affected. Now, if we talk about the humans, have they done enough safety testing of this vaccine on human subjects?
No, not even close. We're supposed to do 10 to 15 years of studies before we approve anything like this. We're doing it, and well, they started doing it in less than 1 year. And one of the companies, Moderna, bragged they were able to make the code in 2 days. 2 days. How in the world can you prove that is safe or effective? You cannot. We need long-term studies. We need to ensure that these kind of genetic codes, because now we're dealing with our genes, our genome, that we have to prove that it doesn't, it's not there long-term or taken up permanently, because that's a big deal. They're telling us, don't worry, it won't be permanent. Well, first of all, they don't know that. None of the studies will be done to the end of 2022. And if it is taken up permanently, everybody in the world needs to know this. By law, if anything becomes synthetic inside of our genes or genome, by law, anybody who owns the patent on that synthetic gene will then own part or all of you. And this is horrific to know. I'm speechless knowing that any court has approved that any human can be owned for any reason. So I believe this is why the drug manufacturers are being so strong and adamant by saying there's no way that this is permanent. They don't want you to know that it could be permanent, because if it is, wow, no human should be owned. Just know that we use the same kind of mechanism in doing or creating genetically modified organisms like the plants and the vegetables, and you know this very well, Monsanto. Their plants are not fertile. They don't make their own seeds. They're not very healthy plants. They get infections quite a bit. They don't have many nutrients. Well, you can extrapolate that to humans. If we become genetically modified, we know we will likely be sterile, meaning we won't reproduce. We won't be as healthy. We won't live as long. Any kind of animal that's genetically modified, that's what happens. And anything that's genetically modified can be owned. This is really important to know that.